All right, welcome to today's show. So we're just going to get into it. So I've been watching some interviews with Saylor recently, and he just has given a great description of the history of why he chose Bitcoin. And I think this presentation that I'm about to share, that's going to go A to B, is really substantiates why MSTR is an extraordinary company with an extraordinary leader, and the mind behind this company of Michael Saylor, and why the future of MSTR is so bright, and why he made the exact perfect choice for putting Bitcoin in the corporate treasury. So we're going to get into this right now. Of course, as always, not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. Do your own research for sure, and do your own financial decisions. And here's the disclaimer here. All right. So let's jump in right now and let's get into the game. So the game is this. All right. I want to walk you through what I put together for you here today. And it's a very fascinating perspective from Michael Saylor in just studying what he's been doing over the last, 5 years. So, as you know, he discovered Bitcoin in 2020, and he's become one of the most passionate just supporters of Bitcoin. And his company owns like close to 3% of all the Bitcoin in circulation right now. And so what I want to talk about today is the perspective, like when you get back to the ideology and the belief system and why Saylor chose Bitcoin. It just increases your certainty and my certainty for sure in why I chose MSTR, and increases my certainty in what this whole game is about. And so it's powerful what Saylor's put together and what Saylor's actually done, and I want to walk you guys through it in today's presentation. Okay. So of course, the first thing is to understand the journey of Michael Saylor. And this is just important. Like, one should know this, as he started a company in 1989, many of you know, and 30 years he'd been running this enterprise software company called MicroStrategy. And basically it's a business intelligence company that creates software. And they were competing with Microsoft at the time, and still are competing with Microsoft. And he just wasn't winning in the marketplace. And in his interview that I was watching recently, he really talks about this from about 2010 to 2020. If you look at this plateau period over here to the right, he had expanded the company. He had tried everything to get it to move from a $500 million a year company to like increase. And over 10 years, it kind of stayed stagnant. And no matter what he did, like pushing on this company and pushing on the ideology of MicroStrategy and their business intelligence software, he just wasn't moving in the direction that he wanted. And of course, we all know in March of 2020, Saylor says, I'm at a dead end there, very frustrated, and I started looking for a solution. And that's when COVID hit. And the main thing that Saylor talks about in this interview, which is completely fascinating, which you've all heard before, but he really says that his company had built up over 30 years $500 million, like $500 million of cash reserves. And when you look at really what happened in COVID, just to look back and explore like what actually happened in the economy, the interest rates that were typically being paid out on a company sitting with their cash in their treasury was around 4 or 5% at that time. And when COVID hit, they started dwindling down the interest rates. And you remember, the interest rates went all the way down to zero. So here he is sitting on $500,000 of cash, earning 5% a year. And he's watching his entire, life savings for the company go up in flames because the interest rates lowered, and he was no longer going to get a 5% return off his 500 million in cash with MicroStrategy at the time. They were getting a 0% return. And so this happened, and it literally like was going to be the destruction of his company, and this $500 million that his company was sitting on, that they have taken 30 years to accumulate in cash. And so what you see down here is he says, number 4, Bitcoin investment. He says, I came to the opinion that the solution was a non-sovereign store of value bearer instrument, of which gold had been the best of those. So initially, Saylor was going and he was looking at gold. And he even sat there. I'm watching Saylor in this interview, and he's talking about, he sat there and talked with his attorney. He's like, maybe we should put our money in gold. And the decision was like, no, gold's probably not the best choice. And one of the reasons why gold is not the best choice, which I'll show you in just a moment, is that, Saylor talks about the fact that gold loses 50% of its value over a 36-year period. And because the gold supply goes up by 2% every year, and so over about a 35, 36-year period, gold will lose 50% of its value. And then the next 30 years, it'll lose another 50% of its value. In the next 30 years, it'll lose another 50%. So gold loses its value. And so he decided, as he was looking at what do we do with our cash that is a melting iceberg, where do we put this cash? And the decision was it's not going to be gold. It's definitely not going to be, valuable art, because he was looking at like collectibles. So I just go get a bunch of Van Goghs and stuff like this. Like, what can I do with my $500 million that's earning 0% interest now? And it's a wild thing that took place to where he started, talking to his team, and he turned to his buddy that was by the pool who had told him about Bitcoin years prior. And he just said, hey, tell me about that Bitcoin thing again. And as he was looking at options for his money, he started to look at the dollar, and he started to see that the dollar, the best currency over the last 100 years, is the dollar. And the dollar lost 99.9% of its value over the last 100 years. And that's the winner, guys. Like, that's the winning currency that loses 99% of its value over a 100-year period. And he also talks about, on average, the currency collapses every 30 to 40 years in most political jurisdictions for all of human history, which is crazy. So currencies collapse, governments fail. And the actual inflation rate of the US dollar over the past century, despite official figures that you see in the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is a basket of goods and services that the government mocks up, and they say, hey, here's what we're going to put in. We're going to put these goods and services in here. Here's what the inflation rate is of these goods and services. But the actual inflation rate is 7%. It's not 2%. So whatever wherever you're storing your wealth, if you're keeping in the dollar, you're gonna lose that value over 100 years, and certainly you're gonna lose 50% of your money if you just keep it in the dollar over 10 to 12 years. If you just keep it in the dollar. So Saylor was looking for an alternative option, and one of the things he talked about is like how governments calculate inflation, and he says the government wants to calculate inflation by constructing a market basket of consumer goods. The trick is they just keep changing what's in the basket. So the way they keep it at 2% is they keep changing what's in the basket. And it's selective inclusion. I create a basket of goods that are not likely to go up in price as I print money, and I put that into the basket. So the whole CPI is 100% manipulated. The inflation reporting is manipulated. It's a manipulated system. And Saylor says inflation is dynamic. Inflation's a vector. There's a different inflation rate for every single thing in this room. So as he's giving this interview, this is a quote from an interview he gave with Jordan Peterson, and he was looking at every single thing in this room, from the vase to the art to the bottle to the TV. Every single thing in this room, it's changing every minute. So you don't have like this consumer, this basket of goods and services that just say stagnant, and the price just stays, flat. It doesn't work that way. Things are changing. So he notes that during the 2020 pandemic, inflation manifested primarily in financial assets rather than consumer goods. And this is a really important point. If you look at what happened during the COVID, people were sitting at home. So you didn't see inflation going up with the baskets of goods and services. People weren't out at restaurants eating. They weren't out shopping in different places. They were sitting at home with a whole bunch of money that was printed, and it was in their pocket. And they're like, what do I do with that money? And what did they do with the money? People started putting it in the stock market. And so what inflated was assets sitting in the stock market, and the stock market prices went up like crazy. And while Wall Street was getting rich, and while hedge fund managers and investors were getting rich sitting by their pools, sitting at home, scrolling through their phone on Instagram, Main Street was getting destroyed during that time. Main Street being the businesses on the street during COVID were getting wrecked, while Wall Street was getting freaking highest year ever. So when you look at this chronic problem of why Saylor decided to go into Bitcoin, it's based on this premise of how inflation is really calculated and how COVID just ripped the cover off the ball and drove asset prices up so damn high, and the dollar got weakened immeasurably, and the rich got richer and the people in assets got richer, but the people who are on Main Street and the entrepreneurs and the businesses got crushed, including his business, sitting on $500 million of cash in their reserve that went down to being earning about 0%. And the reason he moved to Bitcoin was this simple fact of like, he didn't want to see his life's work and his life's cash just go up in flames. So it was a choice between a slow death where the company would die over time if they didn't do something, or to make a move and put his assets into Bitcoin, which is what he did. And he changed the face of the world, and he changed the face of history doing this, which is extraordinary. So we really see the true impact of what happened, and we really see what inflation actually is. And when you look at gold versus Bitcoin, there's no comparison. At a 2% inflation rate, this is what Saylor says, the half-life of gold is about 36 years, which means that the value of gold you hold is cut in half 3 times over 100 years. Yes, the value of gold you hold is cut in half 3 times over 100 years. If you started with 100% in your gold, you ended up with 12.5% of the money you started with over 100 years. And that's the most sound form of money that people are pointing to. Bitcoin's advantage is, what if someone designed digital gold? What if you make it impossible to mine anymore? And Saylor talks about, like, if God were to come down and God were to create the perfect money, he would create a digital gold that was kind of like, invisible, so to speak, right? It was weightless, right? It's like one of these things you didn't have to carry around. Well, what's that? Bitcoin. He would create a kind of money where you couldn't cheat and it wasn't corruptible. He would create a kind of money where you could transfer it in seconds anywhere in the world, which is what you can do with Bitcoin. And he would create like a quote unquote God coin where there's only 21 million coins, and he lets you transfer it peer to peer and pay anybody anytime at the speed of light. And so he described this fixed supply, weightless nature, and ability to transfer it instantly anywhere in the world. That's what Bitcoin is, the most perfect, sound, engineered money on the face of the planet, based on money, based on code, and based on protocols. And he talks about Bitcoin, and this is so important. If you really look at this, this explains what Bitcoin is. If you ever want to explain to anybody what Bitcoin is, this is it. This is the simplicity of it. It is an ideology. The ideology that one can be in control of their own money. The ideology that it can be based on truth, and that balance sheets aren't corrupted, and that people aren't cheating, and that any central bank can't come in and print more of it, or any company can't go and doctor the law books and doctor the freaking financial books. And it wouldn't leak. It would be thermodynamic soundness where it wouldn't leak energy. It would preserve energy. And then you would have that ideology and you put it into a protocol. What's protocol? It's a set of rules. A monetary system based on a set of rules and mathematical principles. And then you would have a network that runs it, just distributed computers running the protocol. And the protocol wouldn't be subject to any one point of failure, where you would have a network of computers where they would all have the same information. So if one failed and one node went down, another one's there to have the same information. And you would have a ledger where every transaction was stored and it could never be changed. It can never be cheated. And that's Bitcoin. It's the most perfectly sound engineered money on the face of the planet. And there's never been any money like it. 21 million circulating throughout the planet. And this is what was created. And so when you look at Bitcoin's security and resilience, the entire thing is a fault-tolerant network. He calls it a mission-critical nuclear hardened system. So it's a beautiful thing, and the system is protected by the public and private key cryptography, right? It's a secret code. It's protected. And you should actually have possession of the private key and have control of your coins, which we do with Bitcoin. And, people are worried about this whole quantum computing thing. Saylor says this is the most anti-fragile, indestructible thing in the world. He compares it to asking, do you think quantum computing could destroy the English language? And you really look at it metaphorically, this is a beautiful thing. There's been a new language of money that's created on planet Earth, and it's Bitcoin, and it's indestructible. So this is the wonderful thing that we see happening here. Satoshi had created the perfect monetary network. And even though it has imperfect components where things can go wrong and things can mess up, you have such a network backed by all these computers that if one computer goes down, the other computer backs it up. And you have a protocol implementation, a bunch of people with the same ideology running a protocol, right? And this protocol is run on a software. And as more and more people adopt Bitcoin, the network becomes stronger, and it's an amazing thing. And people get to keep their money, and they don't lose their value, and they win, 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 win. And this is Bitcoin, and this is what Saylor has talked about in the recent interviews that I watched with him, and I think it's fantastic. So I just wanted to share. If you want to go back and watch this from the beginning, I just think it's incredible what this man has created in terms of creating a balance sheet, or I should say creating a treasury where they hold Bitcoin in their treasury. And he set the stage for the rest of the planet and the rest of companies to go, hey, this is a real thing. Bitcoin is a real thing. Companies are getting in the game. Governments are getting in the game. And it's through one man's vision that has guided many institutions across the planet. Now, there's many people been involved in making this happen, but this man, really set the stage with a new way of thinking for the financial system. And he took Satoshi's vision and Satoshi's creation, and he's put it out there to the world, and he's done a wonderful job. So I wanted to share this with you guys today. I hope it serves you. Hope you guys have an amazing day. Yes, amazing things are happening. I have to go and I have to run to another call, but I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. I'll see you guys soon.